Greetings and welcome to another Lessons with Odin. Today I will be teaching you how to make the spawn pit ring. Now this is part of my Frost Drake video series. I'm going to be teaching you basically a, basic right angle weave bezel with some little added flourishing. Now, this piece is better done with a thicker cabochon, so I'm going to be using the new sea urchin cabochon for this. This is the same thing that I've done here. And if you can kind of tell, the bezel is a little bit open on the piece, and it has some of the stone exposed here, so the end and the backing actually starts down here as opposed to up here, so this is why you need to use it with a thicker cabochon. You can do it with something thinner, but you might have to remove some rows in order to make it work. And you can kind of see here, this is the one that I've done with the Rivoli, but the backing isn't really nicely fit in place. It's got too many rows on it, and it works, but I've found that the stone pops out randomly, doesn't like to sit in the center. But the Rivoli can work, you just might have to remove the topmost row from it in order to make it work, but it's all about experimentation. So here is what you will need for this project. I'm going to be basing it off of this stone, so if you have other stones that you want to use, you'll have to figure that out. This is a 14mm sea urchin bead, so all of the materials will be based off of this. You'll need size 11 beads. You can also use delicas, but if you're not too experienced with a right angle weave, I would use these instead. I would stick with rounds, because the shape tends to get a little wonky if you use delicas, at least I've found. Anyway. You will need size 15 seed beads. Now, you can get away with only one color, or you can use two colors. It's ultimately up to you. You will need some Dragonscale beads. I'm using 8 for this project. And you will need 12 3mm beads. I'm using 8 for the main bezel, and I'm using 4, 2 on each side, for the band. And of course, your needle and thread. I'm using a size 12 needle with a length of sono. Let us get started. So what we're going to do is start off with making our initial band of right angle weave using size 11 seed beads. Now I'm basing this band based off of measurements that I've done before, and since this is a 14mm stone, I'm going to be making a total of 16 stitches. Whatever you need for your cabochon, you want to have an even number of stitches no matter what. So basically you need to figure out the perimeter of your cabochon, and there are a lot of tools on Google that will help you with that. Just search the perimeter of a circle, or the circumference of a circle, and Google automatically has calculations for you. So, you will need the radius. This is a 14mm bead, so the radius is 7. You enter that, and you'll get your millimeter length. You'll get your millimeters in length of what you want to measure up to. So, mine was about 44mm, give or take. So that's what I based this off of. So, to start off our right angle weave, I'm going to thread on 4 of my size 11 seed beads, move down, and I'm going to leave a reasonable sized tail to work with, because I can use the tail for the other side of the band. So I'm going to hold it, I got about, probably a foot here on the tail. Now what I'm going to do is pass back through those 4 beads again, so I form a loop. Then I'm going to tie a knot with my tail end and my working thread, so that I kind of have everything left in place and doesn't move around. Okay, then I'm left with a little plus sign shape like that. Now what I'm going to do is kind of move over 2 beads so that the knot is not in the place that I'm working with currently. Alright. And that is my little base. I'm ready to continue working my next stitches. So to continue with right angle weave, I'm going to use this as my anchor, and I'm going to add on 3 beads, because this counts as our 4th. Pass back through that bead, and I have another set of 4 attached to it. Now all I'm going to do is move over to our next anchor bead here, so that we can continue the chain. So I'm just going to move over those 2 beads. Now tension is kind of an issue with right angle weave, and it depends on what material you're working with, but if you find that you aren't making this shape and you like it a little bit tighter, you can reinforce by passing through the beads again before you go back through to the anchor bead. It's up to you, but keep in mind that that will tighten things and you may need to add more stitches. And it kind of complicates it a little bit too, because you have to add 2 for every one, and it's, yes. So, that makes sense. So, one more time, I'm going to add on 3 more beads. Pass it through. Since I'm keeping a hefty tension, things are pretty much where they're supposed to be. Once more. I'm going to move down to my anchor bead, and I'm ready for my next stitch. Keep on doing this until you have 15 stitches, because then the 16th stitch is going to be the join. So, if you're doing this with another shape bead or size bead, that's what you will do. You will do as many up to 1 less than the total beads that you think you will need. So I will see you when I have my 15 stitches. Okay, so here I am with my 15 stitches. Now what I need to do is join the first with the last back here, and here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to kind of fold up my piece so that the first and the last anchor beads are kind of sticking out next to each other, and my working thread is coming out of this side, my right side, so I'm going to add on 1 size 11 seed bead and pass through the right side of the first stitch. Keep my tail out of the way. Then I'm going to add 1 more bead and pass through the left side. Alright, so I've got my bead that I just added kind of flopping around here. Then I'm going to add 1 more size 11 seed bead and pass through the left side of the last stitch. Pull tight, and we have a perfect join. This is where we made our 16th stitch. We're going to reinforce this round once, just to tighten up the join, so that we aren't pulling out in places we don't need to. When we're done with that, we're going to end up on one of the side beads of the bezel. I'm going to pick this one here, go through that, like there. I'm going to be working with one of these sides. Then we are done with our size 11 beads for now. So from here, I'm going to add on 3 of one of my size 15 bead colors, and then I'm going to pass back around through that seed bead, size 11, that I was started at. And I will form a picot on top of that bead. Now I need to pass down to the next one. I'm basically going to be skipping over this one and moving over to the next one. That's what kind of creates the open work setting in our bezel. So all I'm going to do is move down from this 11 here. Going to move down 1. Over 1. Playing with the bottom row of the bezel. Up 1. And finally over to get to where I want to be. Like that. Then I'm going to do the same thing. Add on 3 size 15 seed beads. Then pass back through the same bead I'm coming out of to form a picot. I'll show you the setup once more. I'm going to go down 1, over 1, that, up 1, and finally over 1 again to skip one of my beads, size 11 beads, and move over to the next one. Repeat that all the way around until you have finished all your sets. In this case, you will be making 8 picots total. Alright, and that is what our bezel is looking like. From the last bead that we worked on, the last picot, all I'm going to do is move up to the center bead of our picot. Then, to close off the back of our bezel, I'm going to take the second color of our size 15s, put 3 of them on my needle, and pass through the next top hole of the neighboring picot, so that we make a little joint like that. I'm going to add on 3 and move over to the next tip of our picot so that we join these together. Do that all the way around until you have closed all the gaps. And once you've done that, you're going to want to reinforce all these 15s once or twice around. Okay, now from here, what we need to do is move all the way up to the top here of our original size 11 seed beads so that we can do the same thing. So I'm starting at a tip of the size 15 picot, and all I'm going to do is move up using the right angle weave so that I go to where I want to. I'm going to move up 1, then over a size 11, then up 1, like that, and then over to the right, like that, because I want my picots to be on the same bead on both sides. Not really a requirement, but it just makes things neater. And then we're going to do the same thing again. Going to add a picot of 3 size 15 seed beads. Move down our size 11s. You may find that the bead has kind of curled a little bit in favor of the other side of the bezel. So I'm going down. We're always staying in the size 11 beads. So I'm going to go over. I'm going to go up. Reinforcing would help prevent this a little bit, but if you can kind of figure out where things are, you'll be good to go. Then finally, we go over. And then we're ready to add our next picot. Repeat that all the way around until you've done all of your sets. And that is what we're left off with the top of the bezel. Kind of looks like a crown. Very cute. Now, from my last little picot that I did, I'm just going to move back up once again to the tip of our picot. Then I'm going to cram my stone in the center of it and kind of push it and position it where I want it to, making sure that the prongs of my little picots are still on the outside. It's not going to fit quite perfectly, but and it also changes depending on the manufacturer of your beads. Now what I'm going to do is take one 3mm bead and go to the next point of the neighboring picot and pull that snug. I'm going to do it once more. Take one 3mm bead, pull to the tip of the neighboring picot, and pull snug. You might have some tension issues, you might need to keep it tight so that the threads don't show as much, but ultimately, it's not a big deal if it does, because the dragon scales are going to be hiding a good chunk of it. So we're going to keep doing that all the way around until we've completed the round. That is what we are left with. It's going to need some adjusting and tweaking, but after we're done with that, we're also going to reinforce at least once more. And after some fussing about, that is what we end up with. Now, if the bare threads still bother you, you can either do a couple of things to fix it. You can do another round to reinforce it, to pinch it a little bit tighter and give it some more structure. You can replace the size 15 beads on the top picots with another set of size 11s instead. You can add seed beads in between the 3mm instead as well, but it's up to you. I'm not going to do that. So, for the next step, what we need to do is set up so that our thread is coming out of a 3mm bead. Then we're going to add one dragon scale and one 15-0 seed bead. Gonna pull it down, and then we're gonna pass back through the Dragonscale bead, making the 15-0 act like a little bit of fringe, an anchor to a piece of fringe. And it will kind of dangle above the 3mm like that. Now we just pass through the next 3mm bead on the bezel, and do the same thing. We're going to add one dragon scale, one size 15, then pull the beads down. Then we're going to pass through the dragon scale once more, keeping the 15-0 anchored. Pull that down. Move to the next 3mm bead on the bezel. Make sure to pull tight so that the dragon scales are flush against the bezel. Repeat that all the way around till you've completed all of your sets. I'll show you once more. We're going to add on one Dragonscale bead, one 15-0, pull it down to our bezel, then we pass back through our Dragonscale bead. Like that. Pull tight, and try to put the Dragonscale next to the bezel as close as we can. Then pass to the next 3mm bead. And pull tight to make sure everything is flush. And that is what we end up with. We have our dragon scales resting around our cabochon. Now, as it stands, these kind of flop around and do whatever the hell they want, especially if you use a nylon thread instead of a Fireline. If this really bothers you, you can go back up after you've finished the entire round and reinforce them by passing. So, from your 3mm bead, you go up the dragon scale, through the size 15 anchoring it, back down the dragon scale, and then finally back through the 3mm bead next door. So here I am, coming from a 3mm bead. I'm going to go up the dragon scale, through the size 15, down the dragon scale, and then over the neighboring 3mm bead. Like that. And you just do that all the way around to reinforce the dragon scales and make sure they don't flop around as much. Once you're done with that, we are ready to work on the strap. And that is our finished bezel. Now what I've done is I've moved my working thread all the way down to the size 15 bead that is in between that is right on the tip of the picot on the back of the bezel. This is why I chose to use 2 different colors of seed beads so that I can easily indicate what I want to do. So to start the strap, I'm going to pass through the 3 seed beads that are in between the 2 picots at the bottom. This could get difficult, so a small thread is recommended. Now it's up to you whether you want to make the band out of size 11 beads or size 15 beads. It ultimately doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is add on 1 3mm bead, 2 size 15 seed beads, and another 3mm bead. Then I'm going to pass back through those 3 seed beads to form a bit of a loop. So that it's anchored up, just like that. Now I'm going to reinforce this row by passing through all these beads again. So I'm going to pass through the 3mm, the 2 size 15s, and the 3mm. Back through those 3 size 15 seed beads. Now this can be a challenge, so if you have a smaller needle, that's probably for the better. Or if you know exactly where you want your strap at the end, you can also replace 2 of these rows across from each other with size 11 seed beads instead. Then I'm going to set up the rest of the band by moving up to the size 15 seed beads between the 2 bicones and begin a ladder stitch. So all I'm going to do is add on 2 more size 15 seed beads, pass through the previous size 15 seed beads, then move back up. Now, in order to get a nice, rigid, uniform shape like this, you're going to need to reinforce by passing back through these 4 beads once more. So all I'm going to do is, coming from the front, I'm going to move back down, and then back up. Then I'm ready to add my next row. Now, if you're using 15s with this, this can get a little tricky. So if you want to switch to 11s, that's also good as well. So I'm going to add on another stitch by adding on 2 more seed beads, move up the previous 2 seed beads. We're going to reinforce by moving back down the next row, then moving back again, and finally back down so we can set up for a new stitch. Once more, add on 2 seed beads, go down the previous one, reinforce, and then finish off by moving to the last set you added. Repeat this on the other side of your strap with your tail end of the thread on a set of 3 directly across from it. That is what my ring band looks like so far. Whee! Now joining the 2 ends is super simple. All you gotta do is push them together. You don't really have to push them together, but it's just the easiest way I found to do it. And I've got my thread coming out of one set here from this side, so all I'm going to do is come from that same side, push it down through the 2 beads on the other side. Now my thread's coming out here, so I'm going to move the same side on the original beads and pull tight to move the join together. Like that. To reinforce it, I'm just going to pass back through the 2 beads again and kind of just pass it over and around once more. Like that. Now you're ready to end your threads. Now all I do for this is basically just grab any old chunk of thread on the edge and do a half hitch knot. That's about it. Then I work it into another bead cut short. I'll do this a couple of times before cutting it short, but that's the general idea. That's also how you kind of join the threads as well. And after some adjusting, there you have your completed spawn pit ring. You can also use this in other applications and other cabochons to kind of get around other stones like ovals and such. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to follow me on Twitch to see more of my beading adventures live, and come talk to me because I'm a very lonely and sad individual. Let me know what kind of other tutorials you guys would like me to see and do. Got a couple of things planned out, and yeah, I think that'll do it for me. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and of course, if there's anything that I need to be trying out right now, feel free to leave me a comment down below, and I will see you next time.